Good morning, ladies. We're going to keep on with our series, like Addis was saying, Mind Wars. Last time we met, Addis spoke about the wandering mind, and it was awesome. And if you didn't hear it, go on YouTube and you could find it so you could keep on going and learning about every single type of mind. Because even though you might think that's not the mind that you have, all of us have a little bit of every single type of mind that we're going to speak about for the next couple of weeks. But today we're going to talk about the anxious and worried mind. And I could guarantee that if you're not dealing with that now, you've dealt with it before. But every single one of us deal with anxiety and with worried all the time for everything. And I could tell you that it hits home because I've wasted so many years of my life worrying about things that I shouldn't worry about. Having anxiety, like I talked about a couple weeks ago, I've dealt with anxiety since I was a little girl. And I've realized that anxiety is a thief. It steals your thoughts, your joy, your peace, your confidence, and so on. I once heard a story that a woman had spent her whole life scared that someone would break into her house. She thought about it every night before she went to sleep and every day. Fast forward 10 years, she hears a noise downstairs. And she sends her husband goes downstairs, and that's what happens. There was a robber there. And her husband tells the robber, "Come upstairs and meet my wife. She's been waiting for you for the last 10 years. And I'm going to tell you something, a robber could steal from you once, but anxiety and a worried mind could steal from you for years, decades, or even your whole life. So that's why we have to remember, our mind moves to the direction of our strongest thought. If all you're doing is worrying and having anxiety, that's what your life is going to have. That's all that your life is going to be able to move to because that's your strongest thought. And I know this is true because instead of us praying and giving it to God, as soon as we have a situation come, we start worrying about it. What can I do? How can I solve this? What's going to be the outcome? What can I do with my hands? And that's when I learned 5 little words, which is let go and let God. I used to say that all the time. Let go and let God. Let go and let God. But I was lying to myself. Because I was saying and I was praying to God and telling him, take over this situation. But my mind was still worrying about it. I still had anxiety. I still had stress. So reality is I did not let go and I did not let God. You know why? Because I wasn't letting God do his job. I wanted to be God. I wanted to be the God of my mind. And I had to learn the hard way. I had to learn the hard way because I remember that everything in my life was going great. For a very long time, I saw that everything was getting better, and I was coming to church, and I was worshiping God, and I was serving at church and everything. But there was one area of my life that was still destroyed, that I was still having anxiety over, I was still having stress over, and I didn't understand. And I remember praying to God, and God telling me, you haven't let go. Of course I did. God, I prayed to you. I came to the altar. I kneeled down there and I gave it to you. And God would tell me, you haven't let go. And I remember having lunch with my friend, and she tells me, and I tell her, look what's happening to me. I'm still with this situation. She goes, you haven't let go. You haven't given it to God. I'm like, of course I have. I already came to the altar. I've prayed about it. She's like, you haven't. If it's still dominating your mind, if it's still in your thoughts, that means you have not given it to God. Then, of course, I didn't trust her. So I had a friend of mine pray over me, and she starts praying for me. She said, God's telling me that whatever situation you're dealing with, you haven't let go. And I remember that night I get home, and I'm like, okay, God, do whatever you want with me and just take over because I can't deal with this anymore. And I could tell you, I told God, I'm done playing God. I'm done being the God over my mind, and I want you to take over. But it took a lot of heartaches, and it took a lot of pain, because God had to undo everything I had done. And that's what happens to a lot of us. A lot of us say, oh, when I give it to God, it's harder. No, it's not harder. He's fixing the mess you had already made. Because the day the problem came, you had to give it to him and let go. No, what do? You keep on sticking your fingers in there. When I was little, my mom had told me something. Vamos a ayudar a Dios. No, I've learned now, we can't help God because we do not know how to be God. There's only one God. You're not God, you're not God, you're not God. None of us here are God. There's only one God. And we have to stop being the CEO of our mind. And today, we're going to learn how to resign being CEO of our mind. And whoever's ready this morning, you're going to sign a contract. And you're going to leave it in this altar and resign your job. Because all of us have been dealing with that position since the beginning, since you started with your mind. You're the owner of your mind, and we're not the owner of anything. Because God created us for Him to dictate our path, not for ourselves. And let me ask you a question. How many of you have a worried and anxious mind? How many of you are tired all the time? And how many of you are tired of playing God? If your answer is yes this morning, we're going to learn how to let go. But before we learn, I want to explain to you what it means to be worried and what it means to be anxious. Because many of you didn't raise your hand. But I bet you when I explain what it means, every single one of you are going to raise your hands. A worried mind means give way to anxiety or unease, allow one's mind to deal on difficulties and troubles, tormenting yourself with disturbing thoughts. What an anxious mind means is experiencing worry, unease, nervousness, typically an imminent event or something with an uncertain outcome, and it means wanting something very much, typically with a feeling of unease. In other words, anxious mind is the state of worrying so much about something. Before COVID, anxiety was around 30 to 40% of the population. But since COVID hit, we have gone from 70 to 80% of our population is dealing with anxiety and a worried mind right now. And the reason I mostly wanted to speak about is, what I talk about today is anxiety disorders are more prevalent in women than in men all over the United States. Why? Because with the society we live in, us as women have taken ownership of what a man is supposed to do. So right now, we are being man and woman. So we cannot do our job correctly because we're doing two jobs at the same time. So our anxiety level is not here anymore. It is double. Because we are worrying about the bills, we're worrying about our kids, we're worrying about our job, we're worrying about if everything's okay at home, we're worrying about so many things that are okay, and the things the men used to worry about, we're worrying about too. So right now, our anxiety is at another level because instead of this whole women empowerment that came in and learning, and what it has done is it has made us women get more work and take work out of men. Because now women are making more than men, and that we're making more than the men in our house, we are dominating our house because we're the ones that are doing everything in the house. So it's getting to the point that it's getting to us. So that's why women are dealing with more stress and anxiety than ever. And when I read these definitions, I've realized that the enemy has been tormenting me for years. I don't know about you. And he has been driving me crazy. And the enemy knows what he's doing. Because he knows that if he takes ownership of our mind, he can make us go crazy. And we cannot do the job and live the life that God has for us. And we're going to start reading today in Matthew 6:26 through 27. Look at the birds. They don't plant or harvest or store food in barns, for your heavenly Father feeds them. And aren't you far more valuable to him than they are? Can all your worries add a single moment to your life? This hit home. Because how I've talked to you guys before, I always say that God speaks to me through birds. So I've been looking at birds more in the last couple of days, and I've never seen a bird worried, I've never seen a bird like biting his nails. I've never seen a bird like flying around like, where am I going to land next? Where am I going to go next? No, I never see a bird, but we do. We look like, where are we going? We see us. You could tell when someone is anxious. They don't have to tell you. You could tell just by looking at them. But when I look at a bird, I don't see that. That's why God compares us to a bird. But my favorite part of this is, aren't you more valuable than a bird? If God finds food for the bird, tells them where to go, and they are able to have peace, how much more does God want for you? God wants you not to stress over how much money you have, what situation you're going to have, where your kids are going to go to school, what's going to happen with your marriage, what's going to happen with your health report, but the enemy does. The enemy wants to torment you to a point of craziness. And another thing that I loved about this verse is when it says, can all your worries add a single moment to your life? No. It takes it away. It steals from you. It's robbing from you. But the biggest problem that I find in why we have anxiety and why we have worry and anxiety is because we have trust issues. The reason we have trust issues is because we don't trust God. We come to church, we sing to God, we tell him all these beautiful songs, God, I surrender, God, I want you in my life, but you're lying. Because if you don't let him deal with your problems and you keep on sticking your hands in the middle of it, that means you don't trust God. You don't trust his process. You don't trust what he wants for your life. You don't want to deal with the way he's telling you he's going to deal with your problem. So the issue that I have found why we have anxiety and why we have stress is because we have trust issues. And the best example I could think of is when you're throwing a party and you don't trust the vendor that you chose. You call him 100 times. When are you coming? How are you sure you got my order? Are you sure you're getting here on time? Are you sure you're doing this? That means you don't trust him. If you'd really trust that vendor, you told him one time and you know that guy is going to do it for you or that woman's going to do it for you. But the problem is that we want to dominate everything. We want to take control of anything and we don't want to trust God. Remember, when you worry, you only see the problem, but you don't see God. That's all you're seeing. You're not seeing God's hands in anything. And when you were little, I don't know about you guys, but do you guys remember playing the trust game, the trust fall? Someone would stand there and you would blind your eyes and you would fall backwards. And you had to trust that that person was going to catch you. I couldn't play that game. I was petrified that they were going to drop me. I always imagined if they drop me, I'm going to break. There's no way these people are going to make fun of me and I'm going to fall to the floor. Why? Because I had trust issues. And it's the same thing anybody that deals with anxiety and worry has. We have trust issues. We are scared to let go and let someone else deal with our problem because we think we're the best ones to deal with it. But the problem is that majority of our problems, we're the ones that got into it. So why are we thinking that we're the ones that are going to be able to take ourselves out of it? I don't understand, but that's how all of us live. And also, I want you to know something. When you pray and when you worry, you are canceling out the prayer you just had. Because when you worry, you can't let God do his job. So reality is, you're wasting your time by praying at that moment. Another thing I want you guys to remember is we have to keep on changing our mindset. Because if we cannot add a single moment to our life when we worry, we have to change our mindset. Because I could stand here and tell you guys, don't worry and don't be anxious. It's not that easy. It's not that easy. Because it is a problem. And I'm not diminishing anybody's problem. Because some of us here are dealing with something that is very hard. Some of us might be dealing right now through divorce. Some of us might be dealing with 3 days that they told you you're going to die in a couple. You have a really bad problem right now. You might have a death sentence because you're sick with cancer. You might have a child that's sick. You might be going through bankruptcy. So I'm not telling you that any of those problems are easy. I'm just telling you, don't stick your hand in it and give it to God. And what I do is I right away repeat a verse every single time that thought comes into my head. And the verse I say is Proverbs 3, 5 through 6. Each of you could pick your own verse, but this is mine. Why? Because I'm telling you I had trust issues. And I need to say, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understandings. In all your ways, acknowledge him and he will make your path straight. And I repeat that every single time my problems come into my mind. Why? Because I'm declaring to God, I trust you. I'm declaring to God and telling him, my understanding doesn't work. Your mind is better than mine. Take over. Take over my mind. And I start repeating it. And I start repeating it. And that's what we have to do. And I'm going to tell you something. There's one more verse that I want you guys to read, which is Matthew 6:31, which it says, therefore, do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? What does it say right away? Do not worry. Remember, the Bible gives us the best manual, but we don't read it. And we don't apply it to our life. But he's not saying worry about some things. No, he says do not worry about nothing. Nothing. And we keep on worrying. And we keep on worrying. And God knew we were going to worry. Anything God tells us not to do is because he knew we were going to go through it. He knew we were already going to have to go through it. But just like God knows, the enemy knows too. Remember, whatever God tells you to do, the enemy is going to tell you to do the opposite. So if God's telling you, do not worry, what is the enemy going to do? He's going to make you worry. So it's your job. Who do you let take over your mind, how we've talked about the last couple of weeks? And it gives me a perfect example of this picture. Have you ever had a fly roam around your ear? How do you look? Like a crazy person, hitting yourself until it gets to a point that the fly has you so crazy that you start covering your ears. That's exactly how we look, right? That's exactly how we look when we're worrying and not let God direct our path. Because nothing could come into our ears at that moment. At that moment, no fly could come into our ear. But at that moment, all we're doing is shutting in all the worry and all the anxiety and drive ourselves crazy. And God's word can't come into our head. God cannot speak to you. God cannot direct your path. God cannot tell you what to do because you are so tormented and you are so stuck into what the enemy has placed in your head that you don't let him come in. And there's a woman of the Bible that worried about everything all the time. She is the best worrier in the Bible, and her name is Martha. I just spoke about her last week, but we're gonna talk about her in a different story. And she was a control freak. She wanted to control everything, make sure everything was, in place. She lived with her two siblings, but all three of them were known as Jesus's friends. Anytime Jesus came into the town, they would give him, they would make food for him, they would have him there. But all of a sudden, her brother Lazarus gets sick. And they sent to Jesus, and the exact words that she sent was, Lord, the one you love is sick. You would imagine at that moment that Jesus would have came and heal him, because that was the one he loved. She said it which was the truth. He loved him. But what do you think Jesus did? He didn't do that. He stayed sleeping. He stayed where he was for 2 more days. Doesn't that sound ridiculous? For us, it sounds ridiculous. For us, it doesn't make sense that he would stay somewhere and just come and heal him. But after 2 days, he comes to them to come heal Lazarus. But when he gets there, Lazarus is dead. Lazarus is inside a tomb, and he had been there for 4 days. I want you to understand why 4 is important. Because in those days, they would say that after the 4th day, that person, there was no coming back. It's not like now that we have machines that could say the person could come back to life, the person could come out of it. No, they didn't know what was happening. So they would leave that person there and say maybe he's going to come out of it. But after 4 days, that means there's no way this person's getting up. So they knew that he was dead. There was nothing else to do but Jesus. But Jesus came and said, roll off that tomb, the rock in the front. But look what Martha tells him. He goes and sees him and tells him, Martha tells him, it smells in there already. It's done. He's dead. Pretty much like, what are you going to do? There's nothing you could do, Jesus. And that's what we tell God. God, there's nothing else you could do. It's done. The problem is done. They gave me a death sentence. I'm getting divorced. The papers are getting signed tomorrow. My child is autistic. My child has anxiety. I lost my house. I have bankruptcy. I have so many problems. God, Jesus, it's done. I don't care when you show up. It's done. It's too late. You showed up too late. And that's what Martha's telling Jesus. But when Jesus decides to do a miracle in your life, it doesn't matter what the world says. It doesn't matter what society tells you. When he says it's not done, it's not done. He's the one that decides when it's finished. He's the one that decides when your problem and when your miracle is coming. And that's what Jesus did. Jesus spoke to the body, and Lazarus came out, and his body was resurrected. You imagine how Martha felt at that moment? This warrior, this crazy control freak, all of a sudden, Jesus Christ slapped her in the face and told her, I got there when I needed to get there. Not when you wanted me to get there. Not when you wanted me to solve the problem. He got there when he needed to get there. And I believe Jesus Christ is talking to every single one of you this morning and telling you, I'm going to tell you when your miracle is coming. I'm going to tell you when I'm going to do it for you. I'm going to tell you when it is the time. Not when you want it, but when I want it to be done. Because there is a process. And there was a process to this. Why? Because everybody saw that it was a miracle that that Jesus Christ resurrected him. It is a bigger miracle to heal him and he resurrected than if he would have healed him in the middle of the sickness, right? And Jesus Christ is not only here for you, because your testimony is not for you. Your testimony is for everybody else to see. Your testimony is for others to get saved through you. But the problem is we're selfish. And we're looking to see how God solves my problems, how my problem gets solved. And you're not realizing that through your problem, through your testimony, through that miracle is where God is going to save everybody around you. But you're being selfish. And I'm going to tell you something. Everybody here is waiting for a promise. I don't know what each of you are waiting for. But all of us here are waiting for a promise. But you know why we can't enjoy the promise and we can't enjoy the ride? Because we don't trust him, how we spoke about it before. And everybody looks at you and you look deteriorated, you look stressed, you look sad. Through that process, waiting for God to give it to you. And I heard a pastor once told me, when you want to go through the process and God gives you a promise, the first thing you have to do is protect your promise. A lot of us go and tell everybody, and we don't protect our promise. We don't go and pray to God and tell him, God, this is your promise. I'm believing it, and I'm going to stand here and wait for it, the first thing. The second thing is look better than when you're going to get the promise. Dress up with your best outfit. Put on the most makeup you need, ojeras because you haven't slept in 5 days because you've been crying and you're like, God, how much? Okay, do your hair, look beautiful, look better than ever. So when people see her, like, how is she looking like that? How does she look so good if she is going through hell? You know why? Because you're going to tell them, because I am trusting God and I'm waiting for his promise. I don't care what everything looks around me. I am looking better than ever. But what happens? The enemy wants you beat up because he wants everybody around you to look at you and be like, oh, you look just like me. So what do I need God for? You look just like me. And I'm having fun. I'm getting drunk, I'm going out, I'm doing this. So why should I change my life from that life to living a righteous life, a pure life, if I get the same outcome? For what? Us Christians are the ones that are not letting other Christians come to God's feet because we look just like the world. There's no difference between us. We go out on the weekends and we look the same. We go out here and we look the same. We get worried, exactly the same. We have the same ojeras that everybody out there has. No. Tell them, you know what? I slept last night. I had peace. Like that peace that we're going to talk about now, that peace that surpasses all understanding, that's the only gift God could give us. that all of them can never have. Because they could have money, they could have friends, they could have everything. But peace is something that nobody in the world could ever have. Nobody in the world. That peace that surpasses all understanding. And I'm going to tell you something. I've always been a Martha. That's why I love Martha. Always been a Martha. I love every story about Martha. I've read about Martha a million times. But God, have I told you, through a lot of pain and suffering, has made me not be a Martha anymore. I used to throw parties, and anybody who knows me would know that for months before, I had everything ready, like everything, for like 2 or 3 months before. People would tell me, we're not even going to call you and ask you if you need help, because we know that you have everything ready. But God has told me that is not worth it, because I never enjoyed anything. I didn't enjoy the process. I didn't enjoy the partying. I didn't enjoy anything. So I've gotten to the point that I don't care. If it happens or it doesn't happen, it's going to still come out great. And I remember having my son's birthday, and everybody told me, Grace, do you need? And I go, no. I ordered it. If it got here, it got here. If it didn't get here, it didn't get here. I ordered the cake the day before. And people are like, they might not have anything available. And I go, I don't care. You know why? Because we're going to enjoy it the same. If that cake gets here or if we get cupcakes, if we do this, but we worry about everything. And I've always been like that. And there's a verse that I hold dear to my heart, which is Philippians 4, 6 through 8. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your heart and mind through Christ Jesus. This verse right away tells us, don't be anxious for what? Nothing, right? So why are we anxious? If he tells us to be anxious for nothing, why are we still anxious? I want you to know something. Paul wrote this to the church in Philippi while he was in jail. How can a person in jail say, don't worry about anything? Why? Because he had the peace that surpasses all understanding. And that's what us as Christians have to desire daily. Because no matter what circumstance we go through, it cannot dictate your life. And I'm going to tell you something. This book bag is heavy. And this book bag is what all of us are walking around with. This book bag, you cannot stand straight because your back hurts. What do you start doing? You start slouching. And after you start slouching for a while, you start looking down. And that's exactly how we look when we're worried. And I'm going to tell you something. Each of us have different things in our book bag. And let's start. It could be a health problem. Maybe you give that to God and it's a little bit less. Maybe it's your job and you give it to God, it's a little bit less. Maybe it's your marriage. You give it to God and it's going to weigh less. You have family issues. You give it to God and it might weigh less. But there's still baggage here. This cannot weigh. Just because you give 2 or 3 things to God does not mean that you're not going to worry and not have anxiety. Because if you're still worrying about one thing, it still weighs. And all of us have at least one book that weighs more than anything. And this year and last year, it's been COVID. It's been politics. It's been everything the world has done. The enemy has done to destroy us. He has tried to destroy every single person in this world. Doesn't matter where you belong. But till you don't let go of everything, you're not going to have that peace. It cannot be that you let go of 3 things and have 1 left. You have to let go of everything. And I've learned through life that no matter what it is, till you don't cast it, till you don't let it go, it's still there. And there's another part of this verse, which is pray for everything. I don't know how us women could say that I cannot pray for more than a minute or more than half a second, when if all of us right now would go and have dinner or lunch together, we could be there for 3, 4, 5, 6 hours talking about everything in the world, but we can't pray to God. Why? It's boring. I don't understand. I don't know what else to tell him. But you could call me and tell me all your problems. So how come you can't pray to God? I don't know. There's another thing we also say. God is too busy to waste his time on me. I love that when people give me that excuse. I can't pray to God. He's too busy. You're wrong. Paul is telling us, don't be anxious for anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication. He's not saying just pray about the big things. He's saying everything, every decision. When you get in the car, there's a lot of you who have given me testimony that said, I was supposed to go a certain way, but I felt in my spirit that God told me to go another way. And there was an accident there. Why? Because God is saying to pray for everything. Even when you get in the car, even for any decision you make, you're supposed to pray. It's not just sometimes. Another thing it says in this verse is supplication. It's another problem we have. We say, we don't have to beg God, because if God wants to give it to me, he's just going to give it to me. But we beg about everything else. We beg to get anything. We beg to be able to do everything in life. We beg. My mom used to tell me all the time, if you ever go to a doctor's appointment and they don't give it to you, look for la gordita in the office. And you bring her a box of pastries, and you're always going to get a doctor's appointment, no matter if they're booked or not. Why? Because she taught me since the beginning, you beg. You beg for what you want. You don't wait for them to say no to you. So if we do that in the physical, why don't we do it in the spiritual? We don't fight with God. We don't sit there and fast with him and pray with him and ask him, why don't you want to give it to me now? What am I doing wrong? What do you want from me? No, we don't want to beg God. And then there's another word. I want you to understand what supplication means. Is the action of begging for something earnestly and humbly. When we come to God, which is my favorite word, we have to break away our pride and tell him, God, I'm here. I'm humbly coming to you for you to do whatever you want with me. Break me, do whatever you want from me, and take away this baggage. I can't stand this baggage anymore. Take it from me. I want to be vulnerable, and I want you to do whatever you want with me. Our problem is that we're scared what God's going to do with us. We're scared of what God is going to make us go in the process, because it might not come out how you want it to come out, because we have trust issues. And let me tell you another thing Paul tells us in that verse. Give thanks during the pain. We only like to give thanks when the blessing comes. But God is telling us to give thanks while you are in pain, while you're going through the process, while you're not seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. You're supposed to say, God, thank you for what you're giving me. Thank you because I know it's coming. It might not come today, but it's coming. It might not be here tomorrow, but it's coming. But what do? We don't say thanks. We just stay, how I told you guys, destroyed. And that is why the enemy drives us crazy. Because during that process, we don't do everything that God tells us to do. He's giving us straight instructions, especially here in Philippians 4, 6 through 8. I want all you guys to really dissect it. He is telling us what to do. To pray for everything, and be asking supplication and give thanks. And what is he going to give you if you do all of that? Peace. I won't forget a friend of mine, or a friend, acquaintance, came to my house a couple of months ago. She's not a believer. She comes into my house, and we were supposed to go somewhere. And as we get in the Uber, she tells me, Grace, there is something that's in your house that I've never felt anywhere before. I go, what do you mean? She goes, I've never felt the peace that I felt in your home. I've gone to many people's houses. I've gone to many places. But there was something in your home that I want. I'm building my home, and I want that peace that you have there. And I go, there's just one answer. God. Surrender yourself and give it to God. And he goes, but how do I do that? I've gone to church. I've done this. I've done that. And I don't know how to get what you have. And I go, surrender it and pray. And it's taken years of work and years of kneeling down in my house and years of crying and pain to be able to get that peace. Because you don't get that peace just by saying, oh, God, I want peace. No. It takes war with God, war fighting with the enemy, war of fasting and telling the enemy, get out of my house. I'm tired of you taking ownership of my house, because the enemy was the owner of my house for many years. I let him, like I say, I let them roam around. I let them eat my food. I let them sit there, have their coffee with me every day, till I got sick and tired of being sick and tired of being sick and tired, that I got up and I go, I'm done. God, do whatever you want with me. I'm sick and tired. And there's a verse that explains everything to us about peace, which is John 14:27. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. Not as the world gives, do I give to you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. This verse is a verse that each of you should hold on to, because it says, peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. He's not giving you any type of peace. He's giving you his peace. He's giving you a part of him that's giving you peace to be able to sleep. I don't know about anybody here, but how many of you sleep perfectly all night and do not wake up worried or nothing? I'm glad, because you have the peace of God. But if we are not, it took years to get there. It doesn't happen overnight. Why? Because the enemy comes, and he knows that's the perfect time to come into your mind. That's why every night before I go to sleep, I ask God, God, protect my mind. Put the blood of Jesus Christ over my mind and dominate it and take over. Because if not, I get up all night long. It happened to me last night. I was just telling Addis. The enemy knew I was going to speak today. What did he do at 1:30 in the morning? Cling. A thought comes into my head. But thoughts that I have never had. Thoughts that I had never dealt with. And I'm like, why am I dealing with this now? Because the enemy knew if I dominate her mind, if I take away her peace at night, when she gets up there to preach, she has no energy. When she gets up there to be able to speak to all these women, she's not going to be able to give her testimony. Why? Because she had no peace last night. And the enemy started telling me, how are you going to talk about anxious and worried if you were anxious and worried all last night? Why? Because that's what the enemy does to every single one of us. He's like, how are you going to help someone if you're dealing with this? How are you going to do that if you're... No, that's not what God's telling us. God is telling us that he is giving us peace that surpasses all understanding. And I want you to know that the world could give you everything, but he can't give you peace. That's why there's so many millionaires out there. There's so many people who are killing themselves. Why? The world says they have everything. Why did they kill themselves? They had depression. They had anxiety. No, you know what they had? They didn't have the peace of God. That's all they needed. Because if they would have had the peace of God, they would have not been there. If they would have had the peace of God, they would have not killed themselves. But that's all they were missing. And this morning, if you are experiencing stress, if you're experiencing anxiety, and you don't have peace of God inside of you, I want you this morning to really think to yourself and ask yourself, what is not giving you peace? Is it that there's a problem in your kid's school? Is it that your child might have a health issue? Your child might not be speaking to you? Your husband's about to leave you? You're having marital problems? You ran out of money? A family member might be dying? You might be dealing, each of you, with different things. And I want you to remember that God is in the center of all your problems. That is why sometimes you cannot understand when you see someone that has peace in the biggest storm of their life, because they have the peace that surpasses all understanding. Their book bag has nothing inside. Their book bag is completely empty. When you have a book bag that's empty, look, it falls because it can't even hang on to your back of how livianito, how but light it is. But none of us, majority of us are Christians, but majority of us don't have a light book bag. Majority of us are still holding on to stuff. And there's another verse I want to give you before we start closing. 1 Peter 5:7, which says, casting the whole of your care, all your anxieties, all your worries, all your concerns, once and for all on him. For he cares for you affectionately and cares for you watchfully. What does cast mean? Throwing it away forcefully. Not like there that you could still pick it up. Because if you throw it right there, you're still going to pick it up. He tells you forcefully that you are not going to get it, that it's so far away from you that you're not going to pick it up again. But what do? We throw it right next to us. Oh, God, I'm going to give it to you for a little while. And if you don't do anything about it, I'm going to pick it right back up. No, that's not what God's telling us. God is saying, throw it away. Don't worry what's going to happen. Don't worry when the promise is coming. Don't worry when it's going to really come to fruition. Just know that it's done. Just know that God finished it, how he said on that cross. It is finished. Why do you say it's finished? Because your problems are finished. You are not supposed to carry it. That's why us as Christians do not have a fruitful life. That's why us as Christians cannot live fruitfully, and people don't want to be Christians because we are not giving a life that's bearing fruit. And I'm going to tell you one more thing before we close. Your gifts get canceled the day you give the key to anxiety and worry. That's the day that you took away the power to receive that gift that you've been waiting for. And this morning, I have a piece of paper there. I don't know if you guys could pass it out to everybody. And I want each of you to get that paper. And I want each of you, if you're ready, if you don't want to do it and you don't think you're ready to give it to God, don't do it. Don't do it because we're all here. Don't do it because you think that people are looking at you. If you're ready to really surrender to God and not care what he's going to do with your problems, I want each of you to write in those lines, what is giving you stress and anxiety? Is it your children, your husband, money, your job, the way you look, your health, your house, your reputation? Whatever it is, I want you to write it. And after you're done writing all the issues that you want to turn over to God, I want you to understand that what you're going to do with that paper and what you're going to sign is a resignation letter. You're resigning your position as God of your mind. You're telling God, I'm quitting. I'm not CEO anymore. I don't want to take ownership anymore. I don't want to own my problems anymore. I'm done. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I want you to take my formal position. I want you to take the position I had taken from you. And if you're ready to do that, we're all gonna this morning let go and let God. And that little cliche that everybody says, I'm declaring that every single woman who's here today and is online is gonna really live the life of letting go and letting God. It's not gonna be easy. Because I know all of us here as women, we all have a little bit of Martha. We all do, because if we're all women. We all like to control a little bit. We all like to have this whole, I don't want to let go of our problems. But this morning, if you're ready, you're going to do that. You know why? Because I could guarantee from my own life that that's the only way you have the peace of God. And 2 months ago, I had a situation that I've been dealing with for many years. And I thought I had given it to God. And I thought I was done dealing with it. And I remember it was Addis that I had breakfast with and my cousin, and she told me, Grace, you're not 100% done with that situation. Your blessing hasn't gotten here because you're not done. I remember fasting. I fasted for 3 days, and God told me again, you haven't done what you had to do. You haven't let go 100% of what I told you to do. That's why I cannot give you the blessing that you know is right there. I can't open that door for you because you haven't done what I told you to do. And what did he tell me to do? To let go and let God. And I had to resign. And it wasn't that long ago. And I've been a Christian for many years. I've been here speaking to you guys. I've been here leading. And I thought I had resigned everything over to God. But even though you resigned many years ago, even though you resigned yesterday, we pick it up really easily. So as we're hearing this song, I want each of you to really pray, and I want each of you to write sincerely what are the things you want to leave, and sign it and date it. We're going to leave it at the altar, and we're going to break it up. But I want you to take a picture of it. And remember today's date,